If you're like me, probably not running off to the gym in the morning is probably not the first thing you think of. Some of us are that way. Most of us, I think it's like first thing you wake up, you're like, I just want to get into the gym. Gym is full of people straining under different annoying weights or intense activities. They're yelling at times, grunting, groaning, sweating all over the place, collapsing under the pressure of weights. Sounds amazing, doesn't it? Sometimes afterwards they'll sit there and they'll flex in their ear because they're hoping that previous 45 minutes of a workout, had notably changed the muscular development that they could see. It's kind of weird if you don't know what they're doing. And yet I think they know something, or at least appreciate something many of us don't. Their straining and suffering are purposeful and necessary. Muscles only grow when they're stretched or even broken down so they can become stronger. Right? James says our faith works the same way, yet instead of weights and an exercise equipment, trials are God's gymnasium for our faith. When we count it all joy in trials, we're not pretending that pain is pleasant. We're recognizing that God is using the weight of hardship to build endurance. It's building maturity. It's strengthening us in Christ. It's conforming us to His image. And an athlete understanding this lives out something many of us struggle to appreciate. The longevity of future health comes from present distress. Right? The longevity of future help comes from present distress. And similarly, in the Christian life, we need to realize this following purpose. Christian maturity is eternally more valuable than present comfort. Christian maturity is eternally more valuable than our present comfort. We come to James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. Let me read them again for you. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Now, it's possible that we would come to this text and we would see the first statement, count it all joy, and the word joy grabs our attention probably, and we receive this as a command, be joyful in all trials. While that may be true, that is not the command. What's the command? Count. What does that mean? We'll look at that in just a second. So, the concept is you're supposed to count everything an opportunity, every trial is an opportunity for joy. Let's address this concept of joy first. I think a lot of times we struggle maybe nuancing this term just a little bit. In most emotive terms, there is usually both an emotional element of it and a decision element in it. For instance, love. I can feel love. So often when we're young and dating, or when we're old and dating, whenever, you say you love someone. Often in those contexts, it's this emotion that's just welling up in us, and we feel this intense affection for someone. It's real, it's legitimate, it's wonderful. God crafted us this way, but it's an emotive thing, right? I have this feeling of love. And often when people say, well, I don't love you anymore, they're talking about that feeling of love. I don't have that feeling, their emotion of love. And yet, we can also have this deliberate action or mental decision to choose love. So I can sacrifice myself for you, even if I don't feel it. I can love you. I can choose to love you, separate from my emotion, right? We do this with trust. If one of you who has crashed my car multiple times, no one has done that in here, family or not, right? You come up to me and you've crashed my car several times and you're like, hey, can I have the keys to your car? And I would say, I don't trust you. What does that mean? Like, I don't feel like this is a good idea. My emotion is a little disturbed at this point. No, I really don't want you to be driving my car. You don't seem very competent to drive cars. So, no, but if I hand you the keys, I'm trusting you. Not feeling it, but I'm entrusting my car to you. I'm making a deliberate decision against my emotions to trust you. So there's this concept both of an emotion that I feel, but also a decision that I can make. It's true of love, it's true of trust, it's true of joy. And the biblical authors discuss both of these. For instance, when the shepherd boy finds his sheep, he's elated to find his lost sheep. That's this emotion of joy. He's excited about this. When Jesus healed a woman who was bound by Satan for 18 years, the whole multitude experiences this emotion of joy. Can you imagine? This woman has been debilitated all these years, and she's healed in front of you, and you're like, oh man, this is exciting, right? There's this emotion of joy. But there can also be a decision to rejoice, and it's not necessarily contingent on or even necessarily directly related to the feeling of it. For instance, Proverbs 5:18, rejoice in the wife of your youth. Now, hopefully the emotion is there. My point in this is not to say that it wouldn't be, but what's interesting in the text is this is a command to do something separate from whether you feel about, like, how you feel about it. It doesn't say if she's nice, if she's fun to be around. It's just telling you, you choose to rejoice in the wife of your youth. Your feelings about it are not necessarily contingent on this command. Christ instructs his disciples to rejoice when they're persecuted, reviled, and slandered in Matthew 5:12. Christ does not command his disciples to rejoice about the suffering, but rather amid suffering, he's saying there's room for you to rejoice in this. This is something you're going to have to mentally work at. Rejoice in suffering. This is what both Paul in Philippians 4 and 1 Thessalonians 5, he commands, continually rejoice. There's no way you can continually rejoice if rejoicing is entirely dependent on how you feel. If our joy rests in our emotions produced by the circumstances always have to be sublime for me to then rejoice. And yet this is saying, always be rejoicing. It's a purposeful decision, not based on my circumstances, not based on my emotions. This is the kind of joy, it's a deliberate, purposeful, mental effort kind of joy. Consider it all joy. What does that mean? James does not write, count it only joy, as if joy were the only appropriate emotion amid suffering. It's not like in every trial and in every tribulation, only experience joy. Consider every moment just joyful. I'm always happy. How you doing? I'm great. I'm lying, but I'm good. I'm just going to put on this front. He doesn't say the only experience you have, the only emotion or the decisions you make is joyful. And the New Revised Standard Version actually says it this way: whenever you face trials of any kind, consider it nothing but joy. That's really not what he's saying. That seems to give no home for grief. If we're to experience only joy in every trial, when is grief appropriate? In his first letter, I love this passage because it has both elements in it. Peter acknowledges this commingling of emotions in 1 Peter 1:6. He writes this, "In this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials." There's this concept of this commingling of grief amidst trials while I am rejoicing. This is why James speaks not to an amount of joy. It's not about, I just have a lot of joy, or it's only joy, it's exclusively joy in the midst of trials, but rather it's talking about the quality of my joy. The NIV words, consider it pure joy. Another version, exceeding joy. We are to have this sublime, pure, real, genuine joy when trials come. Trials are not an avenue for us to put on the facade of happiness when true joy does not exist. We have an opportunity to truly and actually rejoice. So then we come to the command, count. Count it pure joy. Count it exceeding joy. Count it genuine and real, purposeful joy. Or consider, let me word it that way, consider it pure joy, real joy, when you encounter trials of various kinds. In the midst of trials, consider what could produce joy. This is the command that he actually directs us to in these verses. He desires that we consider tribulations an occasion in which we can rejoice. So then, James commands, count it all joy, and it has little to do with our feelings. God did not intend to bring he did not bring trials onto us so that we could have a smile on our faces and communicate to others that we're processing this well. And additionally, amid suffering, this is not the phrase to begin your conversation. If you're coming to someone in the midst of suffering, let me just, quick side note. Someone comes to you and they're hurting and grieving, just be like, man, what comes to mind, it's James. You just need to count it all joy, brother. You probably need to go get new friends if that's the kind of friends you have telling you that kind of stuff. That's Job's friends right there. That's probably a little dramatic. I mean, you don't need to get rid of your friend, but that's not helpful, right? That's not how we do this, but this is how we personally are to navigate this. We are looking for opportunities in the midst of trials to consider what is God doing, and what can I find joy in the midst of my grief. Not instead of grief, but as I grieve in the midst of suffering, how can I think through what might bring joy in this? Christ grieves with Mary and Martha as they grieve the death of Lazarus, even though he knows Lazarus will be raised from the dead, and yet he still grieves in the midst of that. So grieve in the midst of trials, but purpose to consider ways in which you can rejoice when you meet trials of various kinds. So count it all joy when you meet trials of various kinds. We've kind of danced around the context. We've mentioned it in passing many times already, but what is the context in which we are considering what we can be joyful in? It's in the midst of trial. And it says, when you meet trials. It's in this context, now I think it's true of any context, but in this context of James, it seems to be the ones where you're not deliberately placing yourself in the midst of them. You're passively being encountered by these trials. Not that we wouldn't look for reasons to be joyful if we do something stupid and a trial comes upon us, right? We would still learn to be joyful in that. But he seems to be addressing that where something is confronting us, a trial or suffering is confronting us, and we're being confronted by this thing, and we're like, what's going on here? How can I, in the midst of that moment, consider ways in which to be joyful? When I stumble into or fall into a trial of some kind, and that kind there is technically just many colored trials, all kinds of different things. Work, relationships, physical issues that you have, spiritual issues, personality issues in your own self or in others around you. I mean, whatever kind of hue of trial, whatever kind of color of trial that is confronting you. So it gives us this very broad context. Any kind of trial, consider how I can be joyful in this. But why? Why would we find joy in our trials? The motivation for our joy rests in the understanding that trials may result in steadfastness. So first we saw the command, consider reasons to be joyful in the midst of various colored trials. Why? Because you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, making you perfect, complete, lacking in nothing. So why is it that I can choose in any context, in any suffering, to consider ways in which to find joy? Because God is doing a work of producing in me steadfastness. Trials equate to faith being tested. Now, if you're like me, I'm not a big fan of tests. I don't do great in them. It's not like I was horrible or anything. It's just my mind is slow and I horrible at facts and different things like that. And you just, that context in the classroom, you're sitting there, and it's testing your ability to regurgitate stuff, right? That's not ideal for me. And if my faith was tested, like how good are you at being faithful? Let's judge the level of your faith. I'm afraid of what score I would get, right? And that's a context, I think all of us, if that's the kind of testing of our faith, it's like, what grade do you get? And at the end of your test, you're like, well, some of you got pretty low score, right? That is not what this is talking about. That's not the kind of testing that this is talking about. This test does not gauge whether you have faith or the strength of your faith gloriously. Instead, the test strengthens your faith. The faith you have, minimal or robust as it may be, it is taking the faith that is there and it's firming up the faith that already exists. You might say, well, my faith is weak. Well, that's kind of the whole point. We all have weak faith. And in the crucible of trials, our faith is strengthened. Just like a gymnasium, and you go in and you have weak muscles, and the more you go through the suffering of working out, your muscles get stronger. Both King David and the Apostle Peter use this same word of testing in similar context. David describes God's words as pure words like silver refined, right? Or tested. It's the same word there. Tested in a furnace. Peter writes to the suffering church spread throughout Asia concerning the testing of their faith, and he writes this, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. We know our faith is weak. It's so often cluttered and made filthy by our doubt, our frustration, our failures. So in His grace, God tests our faith and rids our faith of its impurities, a little at a time. And sadly, like the refining process of silver, it needs to be done multiple multiple times until you get more and more refined. So trials equate to our faith being tested or purified, and it produces steadfastness or patience. The King James uses that term patience. I think in the ESV we have steadfastness. And often, though, with that concept of patience, we tend to think of patience as reining in our tempers. Like I'm always kind of on the verge of explosion, and patience is me holding back my frustration or whatever it might be, right? And that's part of it, but I would prefer you consider maybe a word picture of a man under a heavy load, and he's determined to stay and hold that load rather than escape it. An example I came across thinking of is Tyndale. He translated the Bible into English, and it was a huge risk for him. He defied the king, he defied the church, he had to flee. He couldn't live in one place. He was just constantly kind of on an alert. He endured poverty. He was exiled. He experienced betrayal and danger, and he was always with the ability for him to just leave. He could have just fled the scene, gone into obscurity, and had no one bother him, right? And he held up this life of challenge, of betrayal and poverty and exile and danger, and his life being threatened regularly. He stood up and embraced it up because he knew there was something that needed to be accomplished. He was steadfast. He was patient with the weight of pressure on him, and he ends up being strangled and burned at the stake with his final breath saying, "Open the King of England's eyes." That is steadfastness. It's a choice to remain in the midst of this and hold this up. And because William Tyndale held that up, I think we can accurately, historically say we have an English Bible because of that. Now, of course, someone else could have come along and done the same thing at some point, but he did. And most of our Bibles find their root in his Bible because he was steadfast. He was patient in the midst of trial, having this bigger expectation than the moment of his immediate comfort. And let this steadfastness have its full effect. Is it not true that we almost always pray to God to remove us from trials? I mean, think through if you were to ask someone, or someone were to ask you, "Hey, what can I pray for you?" I don't know what your response to that would be, but is it possible that many of us, our response would be, "Well, I'm going through this," whatever that might be, pray that that goes away. We'd say it differently, but in essence, that's what we'd want, right? We desire to be free from trials. In thinking through this week, I don't want to be too dogmatic on this, but I think comfort, our personal comfort, is an idol for most of us. It is like, that is the thing I want. And comfort for all of us looks different. How we would define that, or where we would find that comfort, that safe place, that place for where I feel like I belong and fit, and I'm not completely overwhelmed by life. Like this place that I can escape to is different, but that comfort is what most of us long for. And anything that hinders that is a problem, and it needs to be gone. So if we have to do something, like get it done as fast as possible so I can get back to my comfort. I think this is a problem because it's only outside of our comfort that we actually are growing. And in essence, we're saying, "God, I don't really want to grow. I just prefer my comfort." Let me tell you the story of Dottie and Ed Powell. They came to a small village in Burkina Faso, West Africa, as part of their orientation into African culture. They were beginning translation and literacy work among an animistic people group. And they lived in a village of about 50 people. It was extremely hot, the tip of the Sahara Desert. There were only 2 people in the village who could speak French. The rest of them spoke the local dialect. The temperature was typically around 100 degrees. They kept their doors open in their house so that they could have some light and some air. And as a result, livestock just kind of routinely came through the house, and curious Africans who wanted to see these 2 individuals, Dottie and Ed, just kind of poured through their living room and checked them out. I'm sure that was awkward at times. And some short period of time after they arrived in the village, Dottie became ill with dysentery, which seems like, yeah, I can imagine so, right? The heat and the difficulty of being able to hold anything down. She's sick. She could not take any food, and her energy is gone. And she has tears of anger and self-pity, right? I think all of us would struggle this way. And I think at some moment we'd be like, well, Lord, I'm trying to do this for you. Why are you not helping me through this? And one day, in desperation, she cried out to the Lord, "What can I do?" And he said, "Be sick." She's like, "I can do that. I've already got that mastered." She was already sick. She determined she was fabulous at it, and she would follow the Lord's direction in that. The day after determining that she would just honor God in her sickness, she and her husband received a message from America telling of some physical issues with her married daughter and an unborn child. Villagers learned of the concern for their daughter, and one man borrowed a motorbike, loaded Dottie on it, sick and all, and carried her to the nearest telephone so that Dottie could call her daughter and find out that she was okay, she was in the delivery room, the child was doing well. Back home in the village, Dottie complained to God, "Lord, I want to go home. I want to see my daughter. I want to hold my grandchild. I can't stay here." And in that, God's love was present with her. And amidst that outburst, she found peace and she stayed there. She made the commitment, "Yes, Lord, I'll be sick for you." The chief elder of the village grew concerned at Dottie's inability to retain her food. He called for 2 Christian men to come from a church nearby and pray for her. The elder of this village was an animist, an unbeliever. And people in his village had actively persecuted this little church, and that they reached out to this church and asked 2 men to come and pray, and Dottie recovered. And the Powells requested permission of the village elder to take the 2 French-speaking villagers with them to the church, and they agreed, and both of them heard the gospel, and one of them came to Christ that Sunday. After the Powells completed their orientation in this little village, they maintained contact with these friends, and letters would frequently come from the 2 French-speaking villagers, and one of the letters told of the conversion of the brother of the village elder. Dottie Powell learned that God wanted her to be faithful to him in her sickness. He did not require her to be strong. He didn't really even require her to be effective. Just be sick. She was to completely live in faithfulness to him, and he would compensate for her weaknesses. Like Dottie, we naturally desire the challenges and hardships and trials of life to stop. It doesn't make any sense. Why would we be and often okay, God, remove this from me. And in so doing, we are asking, I know not purposefully or maliciously or even cognizantly necessarily, but we are asking God to remove the means of our growth. If God has chosen to use trials as the means to help us grow, when we ask for the trial to stop, we're asking God to stop growing us. And I know I'm being a little dramatic, but in essence we're saying, I don't want to be conformed into the image of your Son any further than I am now. Let's just stop here. Like, don't bring anything else to conform me any further. I just want to be left alone. I want my comfort, and I'm tired of being uncomfortable. Malcolm Muggeridge was an atheist who turned believer. And he said this: contrary to what might be expected, I look back on experiences that at the time seemed especially desolating and painful with particular satisfaction. Indeed, I can say with complete truthfulness that everything I have learned in my 75 years in this world, everything that has truly enhanced and enlightened my existence, has been through affliction and not through happiness. Let me read that again, just to end there. Everything I have learned that has truly enhanced my existence has been through affliction, not happiness. This is not encouraging. If your goal is to have a nice, easy, carefree life, your best life now, as some call it, how earthly, temporally minded is that stupid statement? Your best life is in eternity. It is not now. But if we want all of our circumstances to go the way we have planned, we're going to be very disappointed. If that's your goal, trials will never bring you joy. You will always see trials as a problem to avoid and to get rid of, not as an opportunity for joy. I brought up the analogy of a weight room at the beginning. Let's come back to that for just a second. Most of us don't wake up early longing to run off to the gym. Probably most of us don't want to run off to the gym any time of day, even if it's early. Doesn't matter what time it is. We know we'll probably be exhausted, have to take another shower. It's going to be just annoying. Treadmill's going to be hard and boring. They just stand on this boring thing and do this boring exercise, and can't tell any difference when I'm off anyway. The weights are going to feel heavier, and I'm going to be in a grumpy mood. I'm going to feel sore afterwards. In fact, if I could somehow conjure up a justification, I would just avoid the process altogether. But in the end, that exercise routine would help me be healthier and stronger, right? Similarly, we don't wake up in the morning and hope for trials in life. Man, what's God going to destroy in my life today? This is exciting. If we get our preference, we would never walk into God's gym of trials. I don't want a membership in that gym. And you know what? Yet in His love, unlike a gym down the street, God just says, nope, you're a member and I'm putting you in there. Here you go. I'm setting you in the gym, and here's some weight. The suffering is real, but so is the strengthening of our faith. And James tells us that through these trials, God is producing steadfastness, endurance, maturity. He's doing a good work in you. Fine. Don't like the gym. That's fine. Consider what it's doing for you and find joy in that. So, a couple things. I want you to personally apply a couple things, and I want to just draw one community application here. First, don't despise God's gym of trials. Don't despise it. I'm not saying revel in it, but don't despise it. You don't need to skip around like, I just love trials. Suffering is great. But in the midst of it, we should be able to choose joy. We can't necessarily force ourselves to feel delight, but we can choose joy. God is doing a work in you. Suffering is not God's punishment. It is His training grounds. Don't despise God's gym of trials. 2, stay under the weight. Like Dottie. Some of you, just be sick. Accept the trials and training God determines for your good. Don't unnecessarily prolong them. I'm not saying like, oh man, I could actually step out of this trial, but let's just see how long we can go in this. Like, that's silly, right? That's not what God is expecting. We don't have to try to produce unnecessary suffering in our life just to grow. God's going to bring plenty our way, and He knows when to bring it. Like, you don't have to bring it on yourself. It's going to be fine. You're going to have plenty of it anyway. But when suffering and trial comes, accept it as God's good work in your life. He is doing something in you. See it as an unnatural opportunity in your life. Oh, this stinks. I'm sad. But what can I learn through this? What is God doing through this? How can I be changed in this? Stay under the weight of trial. Don't do everything you can to escape it. And 3, trust the trainer. He knows what you can handle. He does not allow suffering unnecessarily. Trust God in the midst of your trials. He's doing a good work. So then, consider it in the midst of all kinds of varied colored hues trials. Consider the reasons for which you can find joy. And primarily, it's because in the midst of trials, God is working you out, strengthening your faith, making you more like His Son. And that is a good thing. The frustration you feel is not a good thing. The physical suffering you're experiencing is not necessarily a good thing. The hurt and the annoyances of work are not a good thing. The broken relationships you're experiencing are not a good thing. But God can do something good through those things, changing you into the kind of person that He desires for you to be, and you ought to desire to be. Receive it. Now, one final application as kind of a community thing. And let me stick with this gym motif for a second. If we go into the gym and we see one of our teammates struggling with a 400-pound barbell on their chest and they're unable to lift it, let's not be like the culture around us right now, stand in the corner trying to get a short video clip so we can post it on Facebook and say, wow, I hope they get it. That looks tough. Hope you get it. As they're suffocating under the weight of trial. Like, don't we kind of do that sometimes? I'm not charging you with that, but I think just culturally we do that, and we can be tempted to do that also. Like, we look at other people's trials and we're like, man, God's doing a good work in you. I wouldn't want to mess that up. Let's just let Him keep doing that. I've noticed a lot of things that need to be changed. I'm going to go ahead and let God do that work. Yes, I'm very spiritual. No, like, get over there and be a spotter, right? Like, so you go into the gym, and you're not supposed to go alone. Gyms today probably have a lot of things to help with safety equipment and such, but like, often you don't go to the gym alone, and you've got someone that's standing behind you when you're doing a bench press, and they have their hands out, and you've got too much weight on it, and or you just did too many reps, and you're like, I'm struggling, and what do? They put the hand under there and they help you get it up and put back on. In essence, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. So yes, individually, you should look at suffering and trials as a reason to rejoice because God is maturing you, and that is eternally more valuable than your present comfort. That's how you need to personally view the suffering that you're experiencing. But we, as people next to you, need to engage it. And let's just be honest, I think we struggle knowing how, right? So someone's going through suffering, and you're like, I don't know what to do. Let's just use Job's friends real quick. We've beaten up on them a couple times this year. Let's just bring them back up, right? They did marvelously for 7 days when they just didn't say anything. Just sit there and be there. It's when we start talking, James says, count it all joy. Why do you have to be here at all? Right? Your presence in people's lives often is one way of bearing one another's burdens. Often just hearing them struggle through the process is what they need. and you just love them in that, right? Sometimes it's you offer a solution, things for them to think of. Sometimes it is you're about to jump off the cliff, and I'm going to try to hold you back. Sometimes it's like, have you processed it this way? Maybe this would help you process it. I mean, yes, sometimes we speak, but a lot of times it's just you are present in their life. If you're not sure what to do, just be present. And hurt, grieve with them, bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. Why? Isn't this what Christ did for us? He sees us crumbling under the weight of our own sin. The weight is undurable. What word am I looking for? Unsustained. It cannot be sustained. We'll go with that. Unsustainable. I'm going to be crushed by this, the weight of my sin. And Christ, in his grace and kindness, he's like, let me help you out here. In fact, why don't you just get off the scale, the bench, and I'll lift this for you. I'll just take it. And you get credit. You get credit for it. You can have my credit, and I'll take your weight. That's what Christ does. Because we would be suffocated by the weight of our sin. And yet God, in his mercy and kindness, gives us the righteousness of Christ because of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ and his perfect sacrifice and glorious resurrection. We, by faith, place everything in him. And we're restored to the Father, and he takes the weight of our sin, and he gives us the glory of his perfection. So, because that is true, I plead, God, make me like Christ. And God says, you know how I do that, right? I'm like, well, how do you do that? I put you through trials. Oh, okay. Because that's more important. My Christian maturity is more important eternally than my present comfort. Lord, may we see you more as a trainer in our lives than we do an enabler. We often want you to just affirm all of us and how we feel and what we think, and we are thankful that we can rejoice in your love and grace, and yet we also know that you love us, and your love at times looks like hardship. Help us to not conclude that hardship is unkindness, and yet it is, in essence, your grace helping us mature. May we acknowledge our sinful human tendency to run from hardship, and in so doing reject the growth that comes through it. Help us not pursue it, but help us to receive the trials that come into our lives as something that can be used for good. Be patient with us and pursue us because we are in Christ. Not because we deserve your patience, but we are your children in Christ, and we ask that your pursuit and love of us stem from your adoration of your Son. In his glorious name, amen.